right, everybody. How you doing? Dave Donaldson here with Joe Martin, and we're going to have a conversation today. And Joe, why don't you lead us off today?
Absolutely. So I'm really excited on this topic for our podcast this week, mainly because whether you're attracting talent or pushing your mission and your vision and your value proposition, like all these different things we talk about in business, about like what's our unique selling factor. And those of you that have read the book by Simon Sinek, Start With Why, like this is a throwback. And I thought it was really good. During one of my executive leadership retreats this week, we went back to like, how do we articulate our value, right? And a lot of times it's really easy for somebody, no matter what business it is, whether you're selling hot dogs or you're trying to attract a real estate agent or you're trying to find your next client, you always start with what? Because what's tangible? You know, you're like, hey, yeah, you should buy your keys from me, right? Because I make great keys and I've got this laser cutter that like is amazing and you never have to worry about like bits and pieces breaking off, and like it's a great key, right? Your key's gonna last like 10 years with me. So like, buy the key from me, right? Well, people don't buy, once again, the theme behind Simon Sinek Start With Why is that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, right? So if I sit here and tell you how great this key is, and I say, hey, I got this machine and it's a great key, and you'd be like, and I'm a small business owner, so it costs 3 times that of Home Depot. So, if you're just starting with what, then people are gonna be like, why am I supporting a small business owner that's 3 times the cost? Like, I'm just gonna go to Home Depot or Lowe's and I'm gonna get my keys cut there because it's a third of the price. So if you start with what, people are always gonna find, you're gonna find it, you're not gonna have a unique selling factor, right? You're literally gonna be beholden to price, right? Because people can't align with that. When you think about logic and emotions, there's this term that like people make decisions based on their emotions. They have to get to a place in their life or a place in the decision process that makes them feel good. I've at least never experienced in my life and in any of my sales that like someone goes, yeah, this doesn't feel good, but I'm going to move forward anyway. Like I've yet to have that experience where someone goes, this doesn't feel good, yet I'm moving forward, right?
Yeah.
You always hear someone say this feels good, or I like this, or this makes sense. There's some emotion, there's some feeling. Think about this in your life, right? Like when you start performing, you're like, hey, did you have a good day today? Yeah, I had a good day today. I feel really good about it. Oh, what made you feel good about it? I don't really know. It's because the emotion is never tied to a direct metric. It's not tied to some physical thing that you can hold. It's because there was an experience around it. There was a concept, right?
Yeah, that eliciting an emotional feeling or response from somebody, right? That connection, right? That sets the tone for everything, right? If you're fact-based, I mean, obviously we run businesses and businesses need to run on facts and numbers, but you can't live on those alone, right? There is an emotional capacity that you have to be able to establish that relationship with the people in your world, because we hear it all the time. They're buying you or they're working with you to a degree, yes. And that has value to it, right? But where are you separating that? And it's funny that you use the key as the intro, because that is the key to the front door of those relationships.
It's fascinating, right? Like if you go back, if you can make an emotional connection with somebody, that'll make them feel good about it. So emotions make you act and logic makes you think. So like if you lead with your logic, there's always another logic for something else, right? There's no differentiating on the logic, right? Because I gave the key example, right? If your logic is I make great keys, but then someone goes, well, logically, your keys are 3 times the price of this other thing. Like, why am I going to you? There's no reason to pay more. There's no connection. It's kind of like the idea behind like Apple, right? So what you're really dealing with when you're talking about starting with why we do what we do is you're trying to find early adopters. You're trying to find mavericks, right? Because if I'm trying to sell you a key that's 3 times the price and there's no value behind why I'm doing that, it doesn't make any logical sense. But if I'm like, hey, I'm the maverick, I'm going to change the way the key game works, right? Like these keys are not only going to help open doors, but like the thing has a built-in tracker in it. So like you don't even have to worry about AirTags. It's going to have a tracker in it. And the reason we care about that is there's so many people that have been locked out of their home because they didn't know where the key was. And I had somebody that was like robbed at gunpoint because they couldn't get in their house. Like I have this motion as to why I'm doing it. there has to be an emotional why behind anything that you're trying to drive in sales, because that's going to make a differentiating decision inside of the customer's head.
You know,
Right.
there's a, so Gary Vee, when I first started listening to him and some of the conversations he has and focusing around the relationship side of business, this really kind of struck a chord. Now, it's a factor of age a little bit, so some of us will get run coming, and some of us will not, Joe. And when I look at, a product of the environment that we grow up in, very much relationship based. If you think about the 70s and the 80s, right? We were very communal based. Okay. I would walk into the corner deli, right? Not the Acme, not the grocery store, right? Not the Walmart, but the corner deli. And when I would walk in, the guy would know how my mom wanted her cheese slice, right? That was really important. How much cheese, how much bang for a buck. But there was a conversation that took place. He would ask me about me, my parents, and brother, because he knew them. Then you fast forward into the big box stores of the 80s, and then it was just boom, boom, boom. It's transaction based. Now, when you add in a layer of today's world of transaction based with social media and interaction, what you've been able to do is take those two experiences and combine them, right? And that relationship is now expanded upon through the world of social sphere of people all around the world. But what we get to do through those channels is maintain those relationships, right? We can transact with them, but now we're coming from an area of contribution in the relationship side of things, of separating our value and not solely being transacted. And that's just the way that is always connected with me, that we have value personally, relationship-wise. We don't always have to be face-to-face because technology allows us to do things from afar, but the relationship hasn't changed.
Yeah.
It's only changed that we treat them like a transaction and not with the relationship.
And I think that's, once people know that there's not a transaction, it's not transactional, they definitely see more value in it. Like, no one wants to be sold to, right? Like, no one wants that. But people want to be part of a community. And I think when you start talking about starting with why you do what you do, it's challenging because it's ambiguous. It can be nebulous at times. Like, you're like, I know it's there. It's kind of like culture. Like on one of our other podcasts, like we talk about culture and how it's kind of like ever growing, and there's not like a distinct, here's a pen, this is our culture, right? It's a lot easier if we just said, this is the thing that defines our culture, or this thing defines our mission. It's this thing, right? But that's not inspirational. Like, me giving you a pen to say this is our mission is like, there's nothing about that. Right. But if, like, I'll use the example for like one of the companies that I'm involved in, is like, the mission is to transform lives, careers, communities through real estate. Right now, impacting homes and families served is the metric. Right. But if I just said, hey, our mission is to serve 1,000 families in home ownership. Okay, there's a lot of people that do that. There's no differentiating value proposition. But if I look at transforming lives, careers, and communities through real estate, when someone says, well, Joe, how do you know that? How are you legitimate? I go, well, we served 1,000 families. Right. But that's not why I do it. That's just what we did. Like, if we didn't do the what, our narrative around the transforming lives, careers, and communities through real estate would be false. Right. So the 1,000 families just gives legitimacy that we did it, going back to logic. But why do we do the transforming lives, careers, and communities through real estate? When I think through this is the tough part about communicating your mission, communicating your value, your differentiating unique proposition, is think about this. Hey, we sold 1,000 families homes. We transformed somebody's life. As opposed to, we want to transform people's lives because we know that home ownership is one of the differentiating value propositions to create generational wealth. We also know that shelter is one of the best ways to create consistency in a young child's life. And those that actually have a home have stability. And if they have stability, they're actually able to think about thriving as opposed to just surviving. And I can see a life where there's a child that goes from rent or living on the street to then having a home where they feel safe. That if they feel safe, they can actually dedicate their stuff to their studies and their schooling and taking care of their other siblings or their parent, right? And that because they have this home that creates a safe haven, they can actually make something better of themselves. And in so doing, they take care of like their house and they get confidence. And when someone has confidence, they're able to actually go out and make a change. And when people come from something that says, hey, I've got a house And because that gave me confidence to go out and go do something different in my community and to show value in an area that most people didn't see. And then in the career side, that there was actually an agent that went out and said, I'm going to help serve this client getting their first time home, to go from renting to home ownership, and the gift of home ownership and how it impacts me to get up every day and know that there's clients out there that need home ownership and they've never had representation or even education on how to buy a home. Oh, and by the way, that's our mission, because that's actually what transforms lives. We just happen to sell real estate, and we did it with 1,000 families.
You know what?
It's different.
When we talk all the time, we look, we're in an industry where people come into it from different career fields quite often. And I think a lot of them hang up sometimes on, hey, you know, I haven't sold 1,000 homes, and that might come across. And I said, you're focusing on the wrong thing. I said, here's the great thing about our industry, right? People are looking for a reason to connect, right? And it's not because you sold 1,000 homes. It's because of who you are. And when you tell your story and you express your vision and your why you're doing what you're doing, they very quickly don't even worry about how many units have you ever done, right? Because they're recognize that you're emotionally invested in them, and they can connect with you on a level that makes sense to them. And that's the quickest way to build a business, is being real to yourself, right? And actually just flat out giving a damn with who you're working with, and be passionate about it. All the other stuff will just happen over time.
I think for those listening, like what I wanted to land with this conversation with Dave is that your mission isn't 1,000 homes served. That's not the mission, right? That the 1,000 homes served brings legitimacy that your mission is being fulfilled. Like if someone said on the street, hey, what's your mission? I said, transforming lives, careers, communities. And then they go, well, how's that going? I go, amazingly, we served 1,000 families. I don't say, they don't say, what's your mission? I say, sell 1,000 homes. Right? It doesn't have an emotional connection on it. Because honestly, I'm not going to get up every day and say, like, I can't wait to sell 1,000 homes unless I know that there's some impact that transcends over the unit. Right. And that's the piece I think for everybody that's listening to our podcast is, how do you sit down and get an inspirational, aspirational mission, and then be able to tell stories about how that fulfilled on a one-to-one basis with your clients and customers or whoever that is that you're serving. Right? Because it's how you impacted their lives that people care about, that your company actually did something more than create a profit, right? That you can have a double bottom line around impacting others and having profit. Because if you don't have margin, you can't have a mission. But if you're leading with, we sold 1,000 homes as your value proposition, you're going to lose.
Exactly.
How you win is inspire people and know that you're in a people business, whatever you're doing. And you have.
And that's one of the things I think is so incredibly fortunate that we have that, because sure, there are some that they just happen. They open, they close, your contract, you close, you're done. But so many more, like 70-80% of the deals that I've ever worked on, there was something that went on that really kind of heightened the level of relationship that was far beyond helping them buy a house. But it's an emotional roller coaster for them. Right. And you're their guide. And you're the person. And it's an intense relationship for a 7 to 10 week period that they will always remember. Right. If you've done it the right way.
So to land this plane, go work on your mission statement and having a compelling story behind it. Just because your numbers of multi-year trends are not going to grow your business or make a lasting impact in your customers. So go figure out what's inspirational, what's aspirational, and then what you're doing has more meaning than just a number on a page.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll see you next week.